Hi, I'm Alicia Alexi, and I have Guillain-Barre Syndrome. And basically this video is about my GPS experience so far. So I hope you guys are willing to stick around and find out how I'm dealing with this so far. So Guillain-Barre Syndrome. Well, basically it's a autoimmune disease. Attacks your nervous system, affecting your limbs, your body. It damages the nerve cells, which can cause numbness, tingliness, paralysis, and it's pretty fast acting. That's like a little simplified overview of what GBS is. And now let me tell you how I got the diagnosis, what led to the diagnosis. So, I was in New York City at the time. I just moved to New York from Nashville. And I was like, I'm gonna take over the Big Apple with comedy. At the time, I was staying at an Airbnb, but it really was more of like an international hostel, like youth hostel. So I ended up booking a room with two bunk beds stacked on top of each other, and so I had the bottom bunk. I was staying there, or booked it for 19 days. The first week I was feeling, or at least the first couple of days, maybe 3 to 4 days, I was feeling okay. I was going out. By the way, I was staying in Brooklyn, the Airbnb was in Brooklyn, not Kirkland or whatever. I'm in the Airbnb. I check in August 27th. That was a Tuesday. By Thursday or Friday that weekend, I just did not feel good. I was vomiting. I couldn't keep down liquids. Water it wouldn't stay down. It just came right back up. Meanwhile, I wasn't just in New York being idle. Like I said, I was doing other things, but I also was scheduled to go and present in DC at the True Color Summit regarding youth homelessness and LGBTQ youth and trans women of color. So that was great, but I still felt terrible. But I was it was planned in advance. I'm going to this summit. I got to DC. I was able to get more food in me and just rest. And that helped a little bit. And slowly, throughout the couple of days I was in DC, I started to feel better. And so when I came back to New York City, the first day, I was okay, but I kind of felt slight stiffness, but I didn't really think too much about it. The second day, I started to notice it even more. The numbness and tingliness was the one that really alarmed me. I remember calling my sister while I was in New York, telling her some of my symptoms, and I basically said it felt regarding my limbs, mind you, because it started affecting my legs. It felt like the lower half of my body fell asleep. I felt kind of disconnected because I knew all my lower half was there, but it was hard for me to have the fullness awareness of the sensation of like, okay, this is where my legs are, this is where my other parts of my body are, and it was just a weird feeling. And so it was hard to stand in the shower for a long periods of time. Using the restroom, like the way the Airbnb was set up, they had like two bathrooms, both had stand-in showers. The toilets were super low and the floors were generally wet, and so that was a cause for hazard. It would take at least a half an hour to try to lift myself up off the toilet. Like, it was like a concerted effort. I had to pull on like this pole that was in front of me where the shower was and just try as hard as I could to grab onto it and lift myself up. And it got to the point where it was so tiring trying to use the bathroom that like I wouldn't try to use the bathroom for maybe at least once or twice a day. Part of that was because I couldn't go. I didn't have the sensation to go multiple times a day. And I remember one day heading to this like recruiting thing that they were having in downtown Brooklyn. And I got off the subway, started walking up the steps towards like the main street, and my knees buckled. And that was the first time I experienced that. Finally, I believe that Wednesday, I had an appointment with a clinic in Manhattan. I called the clinic and I was like, hey, yeah, I don't think I'll be able to come. Started telling the lady about like how, you know, I was feeling, and she was like, oh, you should go to the emergency room. I was like, the emergency room? What? This is the emergency room. I was like surprised. I'm like, really? I don't need to go to the emergency room. But I was like, okay. And so they ended up transporting me to this hospital, again in Brooklyn. Let me tell you, you guys, that hospital sucked. I was waiting there for hours on end before someone really saw me. They were running back and forth. I was not even in a room. I was just like side by side with like a bed and then curtains beside me, and just people screaming and saying F you. They started 2 IVs. I did like an MRI. They couldn't find anything wrong with me. And so like I was sent home, like, or I was discharged around 4 a.m. in the morning. All they did besides like running tests, which they said was fine, was give me a cane. And I had to like basically hobble out of the ER with a cane. So I had a conference in Atlanta that I was scheduled to speak at, and I was hoping by getting the prescription that like once I take it, my legs will feel fine. By the time I get to Atlanta and to this conference, I'll be walking again. So I couldn't get my medicine. And so I'm like very tired. I know I have to get up the next morning and fly to Atlanta. And I still can barely walk. I can barely do anything. I can barely just like function. Next day, which is a Sunday before the conference I have to go to, I'm tired. I'm supposed to fly out Southwest to Atlanta. I missed that flight. I called them saying, hey, I'm having a hard time. I can't get there. They say, well, you have a 2-hour standby window. Okay, I was like, I'm going to try to make that standby. I don't. I'm just panicking at this point. So I have the great idea to try to apply for one of those bad credit loans. Basically, I spent nearly 5 hours trying to resubmit an application to get a bad credit loan. Finally, I'm able to do it successfully. 45 minutes later, I get an email saying, you're not approved. I'm like, what? It's like, you're not approved, you got 30 days to appeal or whatever. I'm like, how bad does my credit have to be? Because it's bad. I got student loans, you dig? Before I can get a credit loan. Like, don't y'all give bad credit loans to anybody? Like, how am I supposed to fly out? I just need money. I just need the money. So, and mind you, again, this is the last day I'm supposed to be at the Airbnb. I was supposed to check out before a certain time, 11 a.m. So the host is looking at me like, you supposed to be out. You need to leave because we got a cleaning lady. She needs to clean in your area and everything. I'm like, I know. I'm fully aware, but I barely can walk, sis. I finally get a lift to drive me to the airport. So I get dropped off at the airport. I still have like the confirmation number from my previous reservation. I get there. I'm looking for somewhere to sit down. There's nowhere to sit down. The service desk or the desk or the area where you're supposed to check your bag in and everything, I'm trying to get there, but I have like 2 huge bags with me plus like a purse with me, and I can't for any reason or for good reason walk with my stuff to the checkout or check-in counter at Southwest without again tipping over. Finally, someone sees me and they're like, this wonderful lady says, hey, my husband saw you over there and he told me that, asked if I needed help, and I wasn't about to be proud and like, just like say, no, I'm okay. And I was like, no, I need help. I really need help. There's no denying it. So, she gets like someone that works at Southwest, and they get a wheelchair, and so they wheel me up to the counter. I tell them what's going on. At first I get like, oh, I don't think we'll be able to help you. You missed your reservation, whatnot. Then the person, he makes a call, and then he's like, well, you can get on the next flight out, which is the last flight of the night to Atlanta, which was at around 8:45. And I get like a priority boarding. So they wheel me through security, TSA. They pat me down and everything. They wheel me to the gate of Southwest. I get wheeled on. I sit in the very front of the plane. It takes off. I look at like all of New York below me as it's flying away. And I knew at that point that I wasn't coming back. Get to the conference because Atlanta is a trip where I knew people from Nashville would be there. Ended up, one of those people who works for an organization in Nashville was able to get me a ride to and from the conference, and I was able to speak there. I was able to hang out with a couple of the peeps from Nashville because at the time before I was a part of like this youth action, youth advisory board. And at that time, I had to use a wheelchair in order to get around that conference. I wasn't able to walk significantly far enough to warrant me not having a wheelchair. So eventually one of the people from the organizations that work with youth experiencing homelessness in Nashville was like, hey, I can drive you home to Nashville, because at this point I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to New York. I talked to my mom and my sister and they agreed, like, yeah, you need to come back. You need to recover because you're in a wheelchair, sis. What's going on? So they do the spinal tap, they do an MRI scan, and finally they do this other test, which I'll probably put an annotation of what it's really called, but basically the neurologist is tested for like my motor responses through like how slow or fast it is. It's this whole setup. It really is. But by doing like that specific test, she was able to determine that I indeed had Guillain-Barre Syndrome, GBS. For it, I had to get this plasma inserted into my IV every 24 hours for 5 days. And basically, I had to be in the hospital for 7 days. One of those days, or at least maybe like maybe 48 hours, I was in the ICU where they were monitoring me. But yeah, I was in the hospital for a week getting this plasma treatment. Eventually they discharged me and I was redirected and transferred to another hospital in Nashville closer to where I live. And for the next 2 weeks I had to do inpatient rehab, which consisted of intensive physical therapy, occupational therapy, and speech therapy. Although I didn't do speech therapy that much, just a couple of days, maybe the first week even.